So
Let
hello,
me.
welcome everybody, and we're going to introduce. Okay, that was really a great beginning. Timothy Jacobs, go for it. It's all yours. I'm hiding now.
Cool. Okay, dokie. Let me move my things back around again. Oop, awesome. Hi. Yeah, my name is Timothy Jacobs. I am a software engineer over at StellarWP, where I lead development of the solid WP brand. Lots of S and WPs right there in a row. I'm also a WordPress core committer. I work mainly on the REST API. But today we're going to talk about passkeys and why I think, and I think a lot of people think, smarter people than me think, they're the future of authentication on the web. So let's get started. Um, Studies have shown that over 80% of all hacking related breaches are attributed to password compromises. And there's kind of a underlying reason there, which is that passwords just kind of suck. They're really not great. So if we kind of like take a look at where we are with passwords, we have people who create weak passwords. We have people that reuse passwords on 15 different websites that are all the same. Or maybe, you don't actually reuse the password. You just, on Amazon, Amazon's in your password name and your Chase bank account has Chase in your password, et cetera, et cetera. So you have passwords that are very similar to each other. Passwords get stolen all the time. And this is where things really become a problem because when an attacker is able to steal your password, they're able to log in as you. And we, of course, have phishing. With phishing, the whole big goal often of an attacker is just to trick you into giving up your password. And so we've kind of like come up with ways to try and fix this. This is an example from Solid Security, one of the plugins that I work on, where we force people to choose a strong password. But this is a hard to convince people sometimes to use these strong, super random passwords. And so you might have like seen this before, this like horse battery staple type of thing of 4 random words that you could use for password to try and let people have passwords that they can still remember, but are still secure. And that's an improvement, but still you have the problems of it getting stolen, phishing. Are you really choosing 4 completely random words on each site you use? I looked in my password manager the other day and I think I have more than 1,000 passwords in there.
Oh,
I don't think this is, a thing that really scales. And so we came up with like this next level of protection, which is two-factor security. And this is kind of like the strongest protection that we have available. You've surely seen this on the web where, you log in, you enter your username and password, and then they ask you for a second factor, an authentication code, something that was maybe emailed to you or used through your app if you're a more advanced user. But the problem is that like not a lot of people actually use two-factor authentication. This is a report from Microsoft where they found that 22% of Azure Active Directory accounts actually have strong authentication set up. And when they talk about strong authentication, they're talking about two-factor and other technologies. A DCMS report in the UK showed that only 37% of businesses actually had policies requiring two-factor to be set up. So, some people are using it, but ultimately it has a pretty confusing user experience. You have a separate app that you have to use. It can be a little bit slow. We tried to fix this with email-based two-factor, where instead of needing to, open up Google Authenticator or an Authy app or something like that, you just get an email that gets sent to you. But it takes a while for that email to arrive sometimes. It can be flaky, it can be frustrating, especially if you're like logging in on your phone, for instance, you need to switch into like a completely another app, another browser just to be able to log in. And people just really don't like two-factor to begin with. This is, Twitter, which is not exactly the most high-profile, important thing to get hacked, though you probably wouldn't want your Twitter account to get hacked. And one of Twitter's transparency reports, at least when I pulled this stat, said only 2.6% of accounts actually had two-factor set up there. And I found these kinds of sentiments that I found on Twitter pretty reflective, I guess, of what people think. One saying from Ashley, the average American wastes 66 years of their life on two-factor authentication. Skidmore asking, why does two-factor authentication feel like 17-factor authentication? 2FA is the one thing I really hate. It was better and easier when we used only pure passwords to access all accounts. People don't like two-factor. And we've kind of tried to convince people through like a shame-based education method. I found this funny article, point counterpoint, two-factor authentication is the only things between me and hackers trying to ruin my life versus it's annoying to do, which I found a very amusing sentiment, but obviously hasn't really moved the needle on making people more willing to use two-factor authentication. The other thing about it is that even for those of us who are really security conscious, it's still actually subject to phishing attacks. And so here's an example of that. This is a kind of cool phishing example where you might see these UIs where, click sign in with Microsoft, sign in with Google. And this is one where it looks like a real, Microsoft sign in login experience. It looks like a real pop-up window, but that whole thing is controlled by an attacker. It's entirely fake. And what's their goal here? Their goal is to harvest your password so that when you then give it to them, they can now log in as you. And this is like a cool example, but if you're more security conscious, you could probably see that something is wrong. But here's one that I think is very impressive. This is a demo of something called Evil Engine X. And what this is doing is this is actually the real Microsoft website's UI. This is not just like an attacker who put one together that's trying to look similar. It's actually bringing the UI over from Microsoft. And you'll see that Microsoft has this like multi-stage authentication where they show your logo to try and make it more clear if you're logging into the right place or not. They have two-factor challenges here. This is where they're needing to enter the code from their app. And this is just the actual UI of the website. The only thing that's different is that the URL up in the URL bar, instead of it being Microsoft.com, it's at an attacker's controlled domain. But that's a hard thing to look at. I want to make sure every single time that I'm looking at exactly the right place, but it's really easy to make that mistake, particularly if you're mobile or you're in a rush or you're not just looking for the URL to be correct. In this example, it's just cyberfish.xyz, which is probably, on the easier side to see that something is wrong, but you could imagine a URL that looks a lot more like Microsoft.com. And so the big thing here is a theme that attackers really only need to succeed once. They needed to make a mistake, but once you've made that mistake, they've stolen your password. And if you're reusing passwords or using password patterns, they've probably also gained access to tons of different accounts, not just Microsoft or Gmail. They might have access to your bank. And so how did we kind of like move forward in this from an industry? Well, we kind of have these passwordless login experiences. I think one of the first ones that really gained a lot of prominence was with Slack. And so this is a place where you get to skip using your password. You get to skip using two-factor. It's a pretty simple user experience. You type in the email address of where you're trying to sign in with, and then you get an email that has a code, and you go ahead and put that code into the UI. But, email is slow. I have definitely waited 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes for one of those emails to come in, trying to log in and continue on my way. And while these are phishing resistant, they're not really phishing proof. A lot of the times you need to take an extra level of care to make sure that the person that you think you're approving the login for is actually you. When I took this image, I was logging into LinkedIn and I was on my way actually to WordCamp Buffalo. And it told me that I was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, even though I was in upstate New York. And so I think a lot of the time people don't even look at these little bits of information. And depending on how the provider implements their kind of passwordless login flow, it could be dangerous to click this sign into LinkedIn button if it wasn't actually me who was trying to sign into LinkedIn. And so we've come up with Passkeys. And so I'm going to show you a simple demo of what this looks like. I hit the continue button, a UI appears in my browser, and I get logged in. And this is what it looks like with google.com. Here's an example from a WordPress site using our plugin where you put in your username, say use your passkey, the browser prompts you to log in, and you get logged in just like that. So what are passkeys? Well, passkeys are another way to authenticate, to prove who you are. They don't use passwords. They don't use two-factor. In most cases, it offers really a one-click login experience. You just click, hey, use my passkey, and I'm good to go. And the really smart people who built this, they call it phishing proof. because your browser won't even let you log in to the wrong website. We can see an example here where I'm logging in on my phone, where I get a little bit of a different UI. I get prompted, it scans my face using Face ID. And when it logs me in, or when it authenticates me, it gets me logged into WordPress. So passkeys are created out of a standard that you might have heard before called WebAuthn for web authentication. It was born out of a group called FIDO, the FIDO Alliance, who have been working on this space for years and years and years and years. Passkeys in particular were over 6 years in development before they started really shipping to consumers and becoming available to us. What I think is really cool is that they are backed by Apple and Google and Microsoft and lots of other big tech companies. I think it's very rare that we have all of the big tech companies, collaborating together to fix a problem. And so I think it's pretty significant that they are. And over the past couple of years, it's really shown how a lot of these different tools all integrate together. And at this point, it's supported by all major browsers. I've given variations of this talk over the years as passkeys have been a thing, and the multi-browser experience just gets better and better. This is the example from Safari. This is an example with Google Chrome. Google Chrome will actually prompt me with my watch if you have like an Apple Watch connected with you. And I just get to double click on the side button to get logged in. And it's also available in Windows with Windows Security and Microsoft Hello. So how do they actually work? We're not going to actually really get technical, but we're just going to take a look at it from a 10,000 point view. And the way they work is using public key cryptography. And so this is something that you're using millions of times a day, probably without you even realizing it. It's what powers SSL or TLS, the thing that gives you HTTPS, what protects you when you're banking online or making a purchase from Amazon. It's also used in other ways, things like software updates that sign your work, that sign the update that's delivered to you, and you don't need to make sure that the update that you're getting is actually the update that's coming from the place you think it's coming from. It's actually being delivered by Apple. It's actually being delivered by Adobe, things like that. And so this just kind of happens in the background for you. So if we walk through what a kind of registration process looks like, the little blue on the right is us, the human who's trying to use this website, and the green window is the server. And so what we say to the website is, hey, this is me. I want to create a new account. And what the server asks your browser to do is to create a new public key, which is a bit of public information. And so your browser creates this key pair and gives the key pair's public key over to the website that you're looking to create an account for. And then the server responds back, hey, I got it. We're good. You now have an account for me. And so this is what it looks like in practice. This is Google's UI, where you can go in and create a new passkey to log into your Google account. And so you just hit create a passkey, a browser window pops up that tells you what you're going to go on. And then the passkey has been added into your account. Now, what happens when we want to log in? When we log in, we come up to this website again and we say, hey, I want to sign in. And this is where the public key cryptography kind of works its magic. The website that we're logging into gives us a challenge, this bit of data, and it asks us to sign it using our private key. And then what we share to the website is the signature of that data. Now, the website had our public key from before, and it's able to verify that the signature matches by using our public key. If it checks out, then we get signed in. And so you can see what this looks like in practice. Again, with Google, I hit continue, I get a browser pop-up, and I log in. I don't actually have to think about the private keys or the public keys or the signing or anything like that. It's all handled for my browser for me. And I just get to get logged in when I click the yes button. So the actual kind of passkey itself, when we say like create a passkey, what's happening there is it's a public-private key pair. Your device, your web browser, your computer, it's responsible for keeping your private key safe. It isn't something that you need to, write down or keep in a safety deposit box or remember or anything like that. It's something that your computer or your browser is responsible for keeping safe. Oftentimes, almost always, this will be guarded by your device's passcode or biometrics. So for instance, Windows Hello, on a Mac, Touch ID or Face ID. The website then receives your public key, and the public part of that is important because this means it is public information. It's nothing that is private or confidential. And whenever you actually log in, the site's going to ask you to sign a challenge with your private key, and that's what the browser or your computer handles for you. So when we talk about this with passkeys, The important thing to know here that sometimes people will ask is that no personal information is leaving your device. You have your passkey and you're maybe authenticating it with Touch ID or Face ID. But the website that you're logging into, it's not like they get your thumbprint. It's not like they get a scan of your face or your iris or anything like that. They don't get your computer password. All they get is that signature that your browser takes care of generating for you. And again, because it's a public key, there isn't actually anything for an attacker to steal. If an attacker stole all of the public keys from someone's website, they wouldn't be able to do anything with them. They wouldn't actually even know they were you. And you can't be tricked into giving up your password or logging into the wrong website. So if we look at this pop-up here, it's saying, hey, do you want to sign into security.test, my kind of example website here as an admin? And we'll see a similar bit of UI from Google Chrome where it's saying, hey, Google Chrome is trying to verify your identity on security.test. And the same thing with Windows. It's saying in this one, mcortinas.ithemes.dev, another website that we were testing with. And so you might think to yourself, hey, do I need to verify that that website URL is actually the website that I'm logging into? Is this just another place where I can make a mistake? But no, because your browser is responsible for keeping that private key safe, it won't even let you log into the wrong website. It's actually checking that you are actually on chase.com or whatever on gmail.com when you're actually logging in, not something that looks like gmail.com. So while it's showing you the domain name, that isn't actually a step that you need to be responsible for. It just happens for you. Now, there are two kinds of passkeys, and we're really going to talk about platform authenticators, which is kind of what the industry means when they talk about passkeys, but you might have heard about roaming authenticators, so I'm going to touch on them for a moment. Platform authenticators are the things that are built into your computer, your smartphone, your browser. It's what we call passkeys, and it's protected with biometrics and things like that. Roaming authenticators, these are separate hardware devices. So for instance, you might have seen like a YubiKey in the past, which I have over here. And they connect oftentimes just by USB, or they also, the new ones have Bluetooth support, or you can put them in with NFCs and tap on them. There's brands like this for YubiKeys and Titan keys. They kind of work with the same underlying technology, but you don't actually need to know anything really about roaming authenticators. It's for the more geeky ones among us. So what's the browser support like? It's great. Basically, all the modern browsers now support it at this point, and they all work well together. And so one of the things to keep in mind, though, is that different ecosystems behave differently. So in passkeys for Apple, passkeys get stored in iCloud. And so that means they automatically get synced across all of your devices, your iPhone, your iPad, your Macs, etc. At this point, they work great in Safari, but also Chrome and Firefox. If you are using Google Chrome and you prompt for a website that says, hey, I want to use passkeys, the native macOS passkey dialog will pop up for you. So you don't need to worry about having separate Google passkeys or Firefox passkeys or anything like that. They're all part of your Apple account that you're already sharing with iCloud. Apple also gives you the ability to share passkeys with AirDrop. So if you want to say, hey, I want to give someone else access to my account, you can just share a passkey with them and they'll be able to log in. In the Google system, we have passwords being stored in Google's password manager. And so this is a similar thing where they get to sync across your different devices. And these really work best in Chrome. You can't really use them in Safari or Firefox, but I think if you're in the Google ecosystem, you're probably already using them. Google browsers everywhere. And so we should be able to see an example of this. It's a slightly different UI in Google's world, but it's a very similar actual process. It just looks a little bit different. On Windows devices, these are managed by Windows Hello. That's kind of like Windows security subsystem these days. It gets stored on your local device, or you can store it on a nearby device. Microsoft has said that at some point cross-device syncing will arrive. It has not arrived yet. I think it was supposed to arrive by now, but it doesn't seem to be an option. So if you want multi-device support and you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, I'd recommend just using Google Chrome. That will give you the best experience. Now, what about those of us who are multi-platform households? We have many different devices. Well, passkeys are built to handle this. right into the specification. So you can see when I'm logging in here with Google Chrome, I get this QR window that pops up, and I'm able to sign into it with my iPhone. Basically, I point my phone at the screen, it pops up this QR code, and the devices communicate with each other and let us log in. The other thing that you can do is you can create multiple passkeys. So when you have a traditional user account that has a username and a password, we kind of think of you have the one password. But with passkeys, you can create multiple. So let's say you have a separate Windows computer and you have a Mac, iPad, iPhone. You could create a passkey that exists in your kind of Apple ecosystem. And then you could create a passkey that exists in your Windows ecosystem. And you can have multiple passkeys on your account. For those of us who use password managers, for instance, like 1Password, for instance, you can just use your password manager with passkeys now. And so these become a really simple way of having a cross-platform experience where your passkey is going to get stored with all of your other passwords in your password manager, and it's available for you to use. Here's another example here where we're on a Windows computer this time. We're getting prompted to sign in, and we're going to use our nearby phone. The QR appears. And then with our iPhone, we scan it with the camera app, hit the sign in with the passkey button, and then we get to log in. And we're signed in. And then here's an example in the Google experience. So we're in Google Chrome, and then we have our Android phone on the left, and it's a very similar thing. We're opening the camera app, taking a look at the QR code passkey, saying we want to log in, and then we get to log in. And so this is an option if you're, out and about, let's say, and you're trying to use someone else's computer, or you're setting up a new device and you have, your passkey on your phone, but you've just bought home a new Windows computer. You can use this to create your new account.
Oh, good.
So where can you use passkeys at this point? Well, it's all over the place, and it becomes more and more and more. You can use it with Google accounts right now, Microsoft, PayPal, eBay, WordPress. There's this cool site, passkeys.directory, that 1Password kind of puts together / sponsors, I guess. And it has a list of all of these different sites that you can use passkeys. If you're in the WordPress ecosystem, which I think all of us here are, there's some plugins available that you can use to add passkey supports to your WordPress website. There's Solid Security Pro, which is what I work on, but there's also WP Web Authn and Passwordless WP that I found on the WordPress plugins directory. So why might you want to adopt passkeys now? Well, I think they're faster to use than passwords in two-factor, and they help your clients keep themselves secure. If you're building sites for clients, I think it really helped to show them that, hey, you're on the forefront of this new technology. You're thinking about what's the next thing that's coming, and you can help them know that they've made a right choice in you as a WordPress developer to say, yeah, I know this new tech. They didn't hear about this new tech from someone else. You're the one that's coming to them and saying, hey, this is how we can use it and really keep your WordPress site secure. Matt Mullenweg, smart fellow, co-founder of WordPress. He's the one who thinks that also passkeys are the future of security on the web, which I think is a pretty good signal. Smart person. Is the password dead, though? I would say not yet, but we're getting there. We're still making progress. Until the password actually finally dies, you never have to come up with one ever again. You need to keep using strong passwords. You need to really set up two-factor. And you should probably just be using a password manager. That's me. I'm Timothy Jacobs. I'm lead developer over at SolidWP. I'm a WordPress core committer, and I also have a cool SaaS app called Engine Awesome that I'm the co-founder of, where we help folks run their business better with custom apps. And so, yeah, now we can open it up for questions. And I also have some frequently asked ones.
Yes. And there was a couple in the
Yeah.
chat. The first one was, so who's the signing authority?
So there isn't really a signing authority. It's not like a certificate authority with, hey, I am creating a SSL certificate, and I need to prove that, hey, there's this other person who signed it. the public-private key just exists in your ecosystem. So you just give the public key over to the website that you're authenticating with. There doesn't really need to be a signing authority. In terms of when the provider changes the domains, that is a kind of more complicated factor. The way that the spec kind of works right now is there isn't like a, hey, we're handing off domains. Instead, what often happens is that you'll have like a root domain, and that's where authentication will actually happen on. But there are some things that are being explored for adding ways to let a browser know that this domain actually can accept passkeys from multiple domains. It has to be a little more advanced than that. So I can't just say, yeah, my site totally works fine with someone else's passkeys. You actually have to prove that they can communicate with each other.
The sites have to be offering this as an option.
Exactly.
So if they know they have customers with that, they're going to be doing some work. They're not just going to change their domain one day and not let their clients.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you wouldn't want to, in general, so when you change your domain, you often want to hold on to your old domain too, because you don't want someone to start making any links that goes to old domains, become phishing domains and things like that. So right now, the way it ends up working is it kind of like just happens under the hood, I guess you could say. But that is like a known thing that folks in these communities are working on, like official ways to kind of make the multi-domain experience better.
Got it.
Seeing from Josh, what's the drawback? Why hasn't this been more widely adopted? I think it's new. So we added passkey support to solid security 2 years ago now. And we did that right before Apple kind of did their big iOS update 2 years ago to add support for it. And it's been slowly getting more and more sites that are using it and slowly becoming more of a thing that is like available and ready. For instance, today we have that experience where if I'm on Google Chrome, I can just use my passkeys from iCloud. That wasn't an option 2 years ago. So there's a lot of work that's being done to kind of like make the experience better and things like that. And it's just going to be, I think, a matter of time of teaching people. You know, we've had passwords and the concept of passwords. Well, you could say we've had passwords for like, 50 years, and the concept of passwords are a hidden phrase for millennia. So I think it'll take a little bit of time for people to get used to the new technology. But I wouldn't say there's really a huge drawback, so to speak. I think in almost all ways, for the vast majority of people, it's just a better option.
I think Kirsch had a question there. And I think that's related to Gene's also. And I think you ended talking about that.
Client sites. Yeah. So if you are in a WordPress space, you can use our plugin. I try not to spend tons of time just doing self promo about our plugin when I'm like doing these kinds of talks. But yeah, so for instance, if you have a WordPress client site, you can install and set up solid security and enable passkey support. And so you can, have your user account, create passkeys for your user account. If there's something like more specific, it is not in the free version. It's one of our pro features. So that's also my, don't want to spend too much time just shilling on our products. There are a couple of other things that I've saw on the directory, WP Web Authent and Passless WP, which are on the free directory, but I obviously can't vouch for them. But yeah, I think there are some options that you can explore for free.
And then I think that Gene's question is similar, how to provide passkeys for Word. So if you were to, so that would be a nice thing for a member site, because every once in a while I get a customer request like, oh, this was a real thing. We have all judges and they don't have time to remember passwords. Can't you just link them to their account so they don't
so they don't have to remember something.
So they don't have to remember any, and it's like, well, our plugin doesn't have that power, but something like this, if they were to start working with passkeys, could solve their problems.
Exactly. Yeah. Then it just becomes logging in kind of almost the same way that you would log into an app or something like that. It's just, kind of built in smooth experience. Oh, and is Okta a type of passkey provider? I feel like yes, because when I use my work computer, I'm prompted for a biometric scan on my computer, and I can use the biometric on my phone or computer. So Okta might be Okta is a company that provides like lots of different ways to handle authentication and also tons of like authorization stuff. They do lots of things. And so they do offer kind of a way of logging in with Passkeys. And so they are probably abstracting that out for you. It's used in a lot of work contexts, but also like if you're building a SaaS app or something like that, you can use Okta to kind of like get Passkeys for you magically. You don't have to do any work. Passkeys aren't something that I would implement just like yourself. I would use a plugin to do it or a solution like Okta and things like that because it's a lot of code and a lot of work. But once that's all kind of like built for you, then just using it is just, turning it on and adding a passkey.
Just to follow up on that, you tell me
Yeah.
what you think about this, but like, that's like part of it. This just seems, hearing this, it seems like it's overkill, but at work, when I log into Okta, it's like, okay, enter your password. And it's like, when I hit enter, that's the right password. It still goes to, okay, now biometrically scan. It's like both. I'm like, it's kind of annoying. Is that overkill or is that
I mean, I think it's
normal?
all a matter of like, what your individual business needs are, right? So
Okay,
for
okay,
us, I say that, if you're using passkeys for most sites, you can use that in lieu of two-factor authentication
mhm,
because you can prove with passkeys that there was a two-factor authentication. You can require that, they verified their identity. And so, they either did the Face ID or things like that. But a lot of
okay,
folks do use WebAuthn or passkeys as a second factor itself, where you have to then do, the
okay,
biometric thing or things like that. So for those of us who are developers, for instance, you can go into GitHub right now. And with GitHub, you can either set up a passkey such that you can log in with that passkey, or you can, I believe you can still do this, add your passkey as a second factor, and then still type in your password and then use your passkey to add another layer of protection. So I think it's just all about, it's hard to tell one person that, yeah, your thing is definitely overkill. If your login is something really sensitive, or, it might be worth the squeeze.
I wish more people valued their content as more sensitive, like their WordPress site.
Yeah, I think people don't think about, the damage of what can happen to just even a WordPress marketing site. You don't want an attacker to put spam Viagra ads on your site. Your site gets blacklisted from Google. Cleaning that up takes
Oh, wow.
days. It's,
That's
even for something that is just as simple as, hey, here are opening hours, here's our menu, or here's the services we offer. I think it's, important to still practice strong security practices there. I can't too many times to count when I've been working with a client and they email me a password. And one, like, why did they email me their
email.
password? And then
Yeah,
two, I'm looking at the password and I'm like, oh dear, we need to have a conversation about how you're supposed to keep things
right.
secure.
Especially, and I know I've shared this before, political campaigns. I have gotten things back that said John Smith, 2024. It's
Yeah.
like, that's
How
not a
would anyone ever
password
guess? Yeah.
for their PayPal account,
Yeah.
which at least they're a little stricter now. Before you started getting, everything authenticated, and it's just
Yeah.
like, you don't want that. And this was right after some big political person did get hacked. And it's just like, do you read the papers? Do you know what's going on?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I can't remember what the exact stat is, but I think it's something that Facebook shared that they prevent millions of attacks on their accounts every day from attackers who are logging in with a valid username and a valid password. But Facebook is able to use other means of saying like, hey, this doesn't look like the typical location, the behavior is odd, things like that. And so they block
Wow,
millions of
that's
attacks a day.
encouraging. Yeah,
Everyone's account gets hacked and cloned.
Mhm.
I'm
yeah.
dealing with a friend of mine every day now. He's like, this isn't me. Every time I see the post on Facebook, I know it's a cloned account and I'm reporting it. And Facebook takes 3 days. Wow, that guy's getting more person than say him. Like, oh, come on.
So I guess my only concern with adopting this is it seems like it depends on your device, but from what you showed, if I were on somebody else's computer, I could have my phone be with the scan. So that's a
Yeah,
relief.
so
Yeah.
It is a device dependent thing. At this point, it's basically all modern devices. I will say if you are in the Windows ecosystem, it's a little bit weirder because there's so many Windows devices, it's harder for me to say. One of the things that's important for Passkeys to work is you need what different folks brand as different things, but it's kind of like a special security chip. And so if your computer has Windows Hello, I believe that is the kind of signifier that says your device is compatible. If you've got like, a 15-year-old gateway, that's probably not going to do the trick for you.
They are.
Gateway.
But yeah, if you've got a Windows computer with Windows Hello is I believe the thing, but I'm not a Windows user personally, so it's harder for me to say, but I believe that's the signifier. And then if you're in the Apple ecosystem, anything with Apple Silicon, so like the past number of years works, and then most devices also a couple of years older than that also work.
Okay.
But so yeah, it is a thing that there is kind of like a device point, and there was a browser point 2 years ago when we added this first to solid security. It was like you need to be on the beta version of Mac OS and the beta browser and the beta version of iOS. But now it's been 2 years with support, so it's becoming more and more of a thing that you can kind of use with confidence. And then, yeah, you always have the option. Let's say you want to log in for some crazy reason. You're at an airport or something. You want to log in with one of those airport terminals. You could do that in most
And feel
cases.
safe. So
Well,
Gene's question
I probably
is
still wouldn't
interesting.
log into my bank.
Here,
the-
I have a question. Does this mean passcodes would eliminate the requirement of click all the bridges, click all the motorcycles in this picture?
Oh,
Oh,
sure,
that's
like
a
CAPTCHA
A
stuff.
CAPTCHA.
Yeah, so I think in a lot of ways it could. If what I was talking about with how passkeys themselves are kind of like two-factor. When you exist in that model, you don't really need reCAPTCHA. Where reCAPTCHA becomes still a thing is if you have a password, because if you have a password, then an attacker can guess. But if you're using a passkey, it's basically impossible for an attacker to guess. It like treat it as impossible. It's impossible. But what we aren't at this stage yet with a lot of different sites is true. Like, I don't have a password. Like, there's lots of things like with Gmail, you can, for instance, say, hey, I created my Gmail account. Here's a passkey. I don't think Gmail yet lets you say, don't let anyone log into this account with the password. Just disable password support entirely. And so because we still exist in that step for most sites still, I think this will hopefully, if everything goes well, change, in the next 5 years or something like that. But as long as there's still also a password protecting this account, I think we still kind of like need the CAPTCHA to be there because that authentication flow could happen. So
And-
there's definitely ways that you could eliminate it, but in practice.
And as I understand it, this requires the site to decide they're willing to support this.
Exactly. It's
so
something
it's
that the
not gonna
site
be
needs
everywhere.
to say. And
Um,
that's where you have that passkeys.directory link. And I think it was also linked in the Zoom chat that shows
Yeah.
a whole bunch. More and more get added every day. I can't remember what account it was that I created a passkey for. Uber. Yeah, my Uber account. You can set up a passkey for your Uber account. More and more things are adding support for it.
There's a question there that is something very common with me. If you have this user, Gene said, if you have multiple Facebook accounts or if I have multiple Gmail accounts.
Yeah, it works really great for it. So I don't have a picture of the UI in any of my slides, but you get two options there. One, I'll show you this bit, which is when we were being prompted to log in. It says, do you want to save a passkey for, I guess in this case, Danny Rico? I don't know who Danny Rico is, but Danny Rico. And so that's the username that you're logging into the website with. And so you can have passkeys for multiple different users. And I have that in some of my test accounts. Apple's launched like this new passwords app, and it shows you all your passkeys. And I saw like 50 passkey accounts on one of my test websites. And
wow.
so like, yeah, you can create as many as you want for different users, no issue. And what you can even do in some of these instances that makes the experience even nicer is that you don't even have to enter in your username at first. You just click, hey, I want to log in with a passkey. And then your device will say, hey, which of these 3 users do you want to log in with? And then you just select that user and you get put in right away. So you don't even need to remember what your different options are, things like that. So yeah,
Oh,
it works
that's
great
wonderful.
with multiple accounts. It's actually really good for that experience, I think.
Excellent. Did that answer that for Jean? That answered it for me. That was good. Yeah. Well,
What if,
yeah.
Tim,
Yes,
what if
thank
I
you.
create, let's say I have a mixture of Apple devices, like I have an Apple MacBook M2 and an older iMac. Can I create the passkey on the M2 and it be used on the older iMac?
So it depends how old the older iMac is. If it's really old, no, you wouldn't be able to use it. I think you would
I'm
be
one
able
OS
to.
behind. It's one OS behind. I don't know if it's based on the OS or not.
It's not the OS, but the hardware. Basically, for Mac
Okay.
devices, you need what's called a T2 security chip. And so if you Google like the wiki page or whatever it says, I realize this is a terrible way of saying, hey, this is how you find it out. Just Google this super thing. But that's the actual thing that it needs. What I don't know is if you can still do the kind of passkey sharing thing where you take a picture of it with your phone type of deal on one of those older computers. I think probably not, but you might be able to.
All right, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Yeah. And so here's some frequently asked questions. One that hasn't come up: what happens if I lose my device? So the big thing that's great here is if you're operating like in the Google ecosystem or the Apple ecosystem, they're already syncing your passkey across multiple devices. So you're probably already good unless you lose truly every single device. But if you do lose every single device, both Apple and Google have their own like account recovery procedures. And so those will come with part of it. So the same way if you said like, hey, I completely lost access to my iCloud account, and then they make you go to a website and submit your ID and wait 2 weeks and have a letter, some back and forth, but it's a whole process that exists. So even if worse came to worse, your house got flooded, you couldn't bring your phone with you, everything went terrible, and you also forgot all of your passwords, you would still kind of have a way of getting back to your passkeys.
So wait. So does that mean if somebody stole my phone, stole my computer, they could access all those?
No, because that's where that kind of like built-in second factor happens. So if they stole your phone, they'd also have to steal your thumb still attached to your hand to give it the touch ID, or they'd still have to be able to trick Face ID or know your device password. So there's still that level of protection with the device. And that's why when I said that thing about needing like the T2 security chip, that's part of it, is because that security chip holds on to your passkeys kind of in such a way that an attacker couldn't gain access to it unless they also had your Face ID or they also had your Touch ID and things like that.
So when I'm dead on this on the platform, somebody could get in, take a picture of my eye, and they could get into everything, right?
I don't think so. I think they would need to also partially revive you and be rushing blood through your eye and all sorts of different
things. Good to know.
things.
I feel much better now. Thank you for that.
Exactly. And then, yeah, the other thing here is that you can still have multiple passkeys, right? So you can create a passkey, let's say, on your work device and a passkey on your personal device. I know that if you lost your personal device, you could still use your work device and vice versa.
For the same thing?
User account. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, so if we look at this Google page.
Yeah.
This is create a passkey,
right.
But it'll also display the list, of your existing passkeys. So when this plays, we'll see, we get the continue, yada, 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 yada. And then it will show the passkey that we created down there. And you can see there's still a create a passkey button. So I could create another one. So all of the accounts that are doing it properly, you can set up multiple passkeys.
Multiple.
So also if you want to do account sharing, like let's say you want to set up your spouse with also access to the same like shared email account, you can create a passkey for yourself, your spouse can create a passkey for themselves, and then you can both log in and gain access, and you don't need to share the password. And
what's the password again? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just get logged in.
Yep, I know that conversation.
Phone and tell me that.
Don't say it too loud. Someone's going to write it down.
If anybody else has any questions, chime in. You can type it there. You can talk.
Also happy to answer any other general WordPress security questions or et cetera, et cetera.
Just really helpful. Thank you very much.
No problem.